Construction begins Monday. Sign here. That's all Dorinda Yancey said when she showed up on my porch. Clipboard out, pen clicking, smile so tight it could crack a walnut. No hello, no explanation, no deed she could actually point to. I didn't take the pen. She left the clipboard anyway. Walked back to her white Escalade like the conversation was already over. Like my signature was just a formality she'd get around to eventually. They built the pool, all 200,000 of it, right on my land. Then they sent me the maintenance bill. Now, I'm a cattle rancher. I solve problems the way ranchers do. Slow, deliberate, and with a result that tends to surprise people who thought they had you figured out. Dorinda thought she had me figured out. She was wrong about that in ways she hadn't even considered yet. What would you do? Drop your state below. Where are you watching from? My name is Garrett Wolfson.
I'm 58 years old. I've got grease permanently worked into the knuckles of my right hand from 40 years of diesel mechanics, and I own 34 acres on the western edge of Calderwood Pines, Texas. Own, present tense. Always have. My grandfather, Earl Wolfson, cleared this land in 1951, by hand. Cedar trees, caliche rock, mesquite so thick you couldn't walk through it without a machete. He built the original fence posts from timber he cut himself, drove 4 iron survey pins into the corners of the property, and filed a deed at the county clerk's office that has never, not once in 73 years, been successfully challenged. My father ran hay and cattle on it until he died in 2009. I inherited it clean. No mortgage, no liens, no easements, just a hand-typed deed on paper so old it crinkles when you unfold it, and 4 iron pins still sitting exactly where my grandfather drove them. That's the land Dorinda Yancey decided to build a pool on. Calderwood Pines HOA was incorporated 12 years ago when a developer named Prescott Dunleavy bought up 600 acres right next to my property and carved out 220 subdivision lots. Nice enough place, honestly. Good neighbors, mostly. The HOA came with the lots, mandatory membership, monthly dues, an architectural review committee, the whole machinery of organized suburban living. Here's the thing, though. My land predates all of it. I never bought a Calderwood Pines lot. I never signed their CC and Rs. I am not, have never been, and have no legal obligation to be a member of their HOA. I am, in practical terms, an island of private ranch land sitting inside a sea of deed-restricted suburbia. That arrangement worked fine for 11 years, and then Dorinda Yancey got elected board president. Dorinda is 54, a former real estate paralegal, and the kind of person who treats a homeowners association like a small sovereign nation, with herself as the founding monarch. She sends certified letters the way other people send birthday cards, constantly, enthusiastically, with a faint smell of hairspray and printer toner and absolute certainty radiating off every page. She drives a white Cadillac Escalade with a proud board president magnetic placard on the door. I am not making that up. The first time she came to my property, uninvited, unannounced, she stood in my driveway holding a clipboard and informed me that the HOA's survey team had determined that the flat, low-lying corner of my southeastern boundary was actually a drainage easement belonging to the community. She had a document. It had stamps on it. It looked official the way things look official when someone has spent time making them look official. I looked at it for about 4 seconds, handed it back, told her, politely, that my grandfather's deed included that section with 0 easements attached, and she should have her lawyer check the county records before driving out here again. She smiled, wrote something on her clipboard, left. The cedar brake swallowed her Escalade, and I stood in the quiet of that September morning, caliche dust still hanging where her tires had been, the cattle gate creaking once in the breeze, with that specific tightening feeling in the chest, the kind a mechanic gets when an engine he just rebuilt makes a noise it shouldn't. You don't panic. You don't yell. You just go very still and start paying attention. I went inside, poured a cup of coffee, too hot, slightly burned, exactly how I like it. I figured she'd send another certified letter, maybe 2. I did not figure on the excavators, but 3 weeks later, there they were, 2 of them, sitting on my southeastern corner at 7 in the morning like they'd been invited. Nobody had invited them. The foreman's name was Bryce. Sunburned, polite, wearing a hard hat with a Dunleavy construction sticker on the side. He met me at the fence line with a handshake and a set of stamped engineering drawings, and he had the particular energy of a man who genuinely believed everything he was doing was completely legal. "Mr. Wolfson, we've got a permitted project here. County approved. Survey's been done." He spread the drawings across the hood of his truck. "Pool's going in right along this drainage corridor. Easement area 7C. I looked at the drawings. I looked at my fence line. I looked at the two excavators sitting on what was unmistakably my property, engines idling with that low diesel rumble you feel in your back teeth. "Bryce," I said, "who filed the permit application?" "HOA hired a surveyor. Dunleavy's office handled the county submission." I nodded slowly. "And did anybody pull the actual deed on this parcel before they broke ground?" He blinked, just once. That's not really my department." No, it wasn't. Bryce was a working man doing a working man's job. I didn't have a single problem with Bryce. I memorized his contractor's license plate, shook his hand again, and drove back to the house. That afternoon I called my cousin, Harlan Dubeck. Harlan spent 40 years as a title examiner at the Travis County Recorder's Office, and his memory works like a courthouse index. You give him a parcel number, and he pulls the whole chain like he's reading off a grocery list he wrote himself. I gave him everything: my deed, the HOA's easement claim, the permit application number Bryce had shown me. It took Harlan 20 minutes. He called me back, and his opening line was, "Buddy, they built on your land. Full stop." What Harlan found was buried in the county permit file like a splinter under a coat of fresh paint. A transposed parcel number on the HOA's application. 2 digits, switched. Sounds like a typo, but in a legal property description, 2 wrong digits can shift a boundary line 90 feet. And 90 feet was exactly enough to move the permitted construction zone off HOA common area and squarely onto the southeastern corner of the Wolfson parcel. I'd read enough property law over the years, the kind of reading you do when your family's land is the only thing they left you, to know what that meant. A permit issued on an incorrect parcel description isn't just a paperwork problem. It's void. It creates no rights. It authorizes nothing on the actual owner's land. The county had stamped and approved a document built on a foundation that didn't exist, and Dorinda's crew had broken ground on the strength of it. The permit was worthless. The excavators were trespassing, and nobody had told Bryce. Now here's where some people would drive back to that fence line and start yelling. There's a time for yelling. I understand the impulse completely, but 40 years as a diesel mechanic teaches you one thing above everything else. Don't start pulling parts before you've documented the problem. Because once you start pulling things apart, evidence has a way of disappearing. And you need that evidence a lot more than you need the satisfaction of yelling. So I documented everything. I borrowed a trail camera from my neighbor Cliff, the kind deer hunters zip-tied to fence posts in October, and mounted it where it had a clear sight line to the construction site. Then I walked the fence line with my phone camera rolling, narrating every orange stake, every piece of equipment, every inch of disturbed soil in the slow, methodical voice of a man who has learned that boring footage wins court cases. Then I went to the barn. The fireproof lockbox lives under my workbench, behind a stack of hydraulic line fittings and a coffee can full of bolt assortments. It smells like motor oil and old paper every time you crack it open, a combination that, strange as it sounds, has always felt to me less like a smell and more like a voice, like everything my family held on to is still in there, still speaking. I pulled my grandfather's deed, my father's probate records, and the 1962 survey. That survey is hand-drawn in India ink on linen paper, faded to the color of weak tea. The iron pin locations are marked with small circled crosses. My grandfather's initials, E.W., are penciled in the margin next to the southeast corner, right where those excavators were now running. I held it up to the light for a long moment. Then I sat down and wrote a certified letter to Dorinda Yancey. Calm, factual, no threats. Informing her that construction had commenced on my private property without consent, that I had documented the full encroachment, and that I was requesting an immediate halt pending title review. Copies went to the county commissioner's office and the state attorney general's consumer protection division. I figured that would at least slow things down. It did not slow things down. 3 days later, a letter arrived from the HOA's attorney. 8 pages. Dense legalese. The core argument: my land was subject to an implied easement by prior use. Because water had historically drained through that low southeastern corner, the HOA claimed a permanent legal right to use it however they saw fit, including, apparently, installing a $200,000 swimming pool. I'd never heard a legal theory weaponized quite so creatively against someone's own drainage ditch. I read the letter twice, set it on the kitchen table, looked out the window at the cedar break where Dorinda's Escalade had disappeared 3 weeks ago. Then I picked up the phone and called Vera Ashcraft, the most aggressive real estate litigation attorney in Kerr County, a woman who once made a county tax assessor cry on the witness stand and considers that one of her more routine accomplishments. If Dorinda wanted to play legal theory games, I was going to bring someone who had written the rule book. Vera Ashcraft is 5'4", drives a pickup truck older than most of her opposing counsel, and has a filing cabinet in her office labeled "Cases where I was told to stand down." It is completely full. She took my case in one phone call, reviewed everything Harland had pulled within 48 hours, and called me back with the particular quiet in her voice that I would later learn means she's already 3 moves ahead. They cited implied easement by prior use, she said. They did. In Texas. A pause that contained what I can only describe as professional amusement. Garrett, implied easements in Texas are about as narrow as a fence post. You need continuous, apparent, and absolutely necessary use going back to a common ownership period. Rainwater running through a low spot on your grandfather's land doesn't come within a country mile of that standard. She agreed to send a response. 8 pages became 12. Controlled, precise, devastating in the way good legal writing is devastating. Not loud, just final. She demanded the HOA cease all construction claims, produce a full accounting of the permit process, and preserve every board meeting minute related to the pool project under litigation hold. I asked her what litigation hold meant. It means they can't shred anything, she said, which, based on what you've told me, is probably going to be very inconvenient for somebody. The pool opened the following June. Ribbon cutting ceremony, sundress, oversized scissors. Dorinda photographed extensively for the HOA newsletter, beaming in front of a pergola strung with cafe lights, the blue-green water glittering behind her, like she'd personally conjured it from the Texas limestone. She looked like a woman who had gotten exactly what she wanted and expected no consequences whatsoever. 2 weeks later, a bill arrived in my mailbox. I want you to understand the specific quality of audacity required to send this bill. I am not a member of the HOA. I never signed their CC&Rs. I don't have a pool pass. I was never consulted, never notified, never asked a single question about this project. And yet here it was, itemized, professional header, Calderwood Pines Homeowners Association, Community Amenity Maintenance Assessment, total due, $1,847. My proportionate share, it said, as an adjacent property owner benefiting from community infrastructure. I read that line 3 times. Then I set the bill on the kitchen table and sat with it for a while, the way you sit with something that is so far beyond normal that your brain needs a moment to confirm it's real. They built a pool on my land. Then they billed me for it. Attached was a new letter from the HOA's attorney, Section 31F, of the original development agreement they called it. A provision, they claimed, that runs with the land and applies to all adjacent parcels once the board votes to extend services, retroactively incorporating my property into their HOA service area, whether I agreed or not. I forwarded it to Vera. She called back in under an hour, and I could hear it in her voice. Not anger, not outrage, something better than both. Pure, cold certainty. Garrett, I just read section 31F 4 times. You know what it says right before the part they quoted? She didn't wait. Written consent of the adjacent parcel owner, your signature, which they never sought, which means this provision is self-defeating without it, which means this bill isn't just wrong, it's fraudulent. The HOA's attorney received Vera's response on a Thursday afternoon. By Thursday evening, every board member's car was parked at Dorinda's house. I know because Phyllis Carnahan, a retired school teacher 2 lots from the pool, who has been quietly furious with this board for 3 years, texted me a photo without comment. Phyllis's husband sits on the HOA Landscape Committee and reports back to her with the devotion of a man who has correctly identified which side of his marriage he wants to remain on. He told her the board's conclusion after that emergency meeting: hold firm. Garrett Wolfson is a retired mechanic. They have a $340,000 legal defense reserve. He'll fold before they do. I'll admit, on paper, it was a reasonable bet. But here's what they didn't know, couldn't know, because I'd never told a soul. When my father passed in 2009, his estate included a life insurance payout. I invested it the week after the funeral, never touched it, checked the balance 4 times a year, and otherwise left it completely alone for 16 years, the way money grows when you live simply and resist the urge to do anything clever with it. By the time Dorinda sent that bill, that account held just over $310,000. The HOA had looked at a man in a work shirt standing at a fence line and seen someone they could outlast. They had badly mistaken stillness for weakness. When legal letters stopped working, Dorinda switched weapons. 6 years of HOA politics had given her a finely tuned understanding of how to make people feel isolated, embarrassed, and slightly crazy for disagreeing with her. She didn't need a courtroom. She had something more immediately powerful: a neighborhood Facebook group, a phone tree, and the absolute conviction that she was the reasonable one in this situation. The narrative she started circulating went like this: Garrett Wolfson, the difficult rancher next door, was trying to shut down the community pool, the pool their children swam in, the pool their dues had paid for. A man who hated the neighborhood, trying to destroy a community asset out of spite. She did not mention the pool was built on my land. She did not mention the bill she'd sent me. She just ran the poll. Calderwood Pines neighbors, yes, with the exclamation point, posted a community survey. Should our pool remain open for our families? 93% voted yes. Dorinda screenshotted it and sent it to the HOA's attorney as evidence of community support. The attorney, to his credit, did not cite the Facebook poll in any legal filing. Then she called the county. She contacted the commissioner's office and suggested, carefully, without quite committing to anything, that my cattle operation might be violating local noise and odor ordinances. No complaint had been filed by any actual neighbor, just Dorinda, a phone call, and the hope that a county officer showing up at my gate might rattle me enough to reconsider. The officer they sent was Dale Strunk, weathered, unhurried, the kind of county employee who recognizes a nuisance call the moment he pulls into a driveway. He walked my fence line for 20 minutes in the afternoon heat, checked the water systems, looked over the cattle, and wrote in his report, "Property in full compliance, cattle well maintained, no violations observed." Before he left, he leaned against his truck and said, without quite looking at me, "I've gotten calls like this before. Usually tells me more about the caller than the property." Then he drove off, dust rising slow and white behind his tires. I appreciated Dale Strunk enormously. Here's what I'd learned in 40 years of fixing engines. When something is failing on 3 fronts simultaneously, you don't chase all 3 at once. You find the root cause. You fix that. The rest resolves itself. So while Dorinda was managing Neighborhood Opinion, I let Vera do what Vera does. She filed for discovery, the phase of litigation that looks tedious from the outside, but is, in practice, the most dangerous moment for anyone who has done something they'd prefer to keep quiet. The HOA was required to produce everything: board minutes, construction contracts, permit correspondence, internal communications, all of it, under oath. 60 days to comply. Their documents arrived 8 days late, but they couldn't hide what was already in the public record. Vera had been pulling county documents independently for weeks, because she has never once waited for opposing counsel to hand her evidence she could get herself. What she found stopped her mid-sentence. An internal email, sent from Dorinda Yancey to the HOA's surveyor 6 weeks before the permit was filed. Vera read it to me slowly, the way you read something aloud when you need to be certain you're seeing what you think you're seeing. We need that southeast corner included. If we pull the pins and restake it, the drainage argument should hold. Pull the pins. My grandfather's iron pins, driven in 1962, recorded in county documents for 60 years. Someone had gone out to my southeastern corner and physically yanked them from the ground, replaced them with new stakes and new positions to manufacture a boundary claim that had no legal basis without that manipulation. I've handled a lot of broken things in my life. There's always a moment when you see exactly what happened and exactly why. The feeling isn't rage, it's something colder, clearer. Vera had gone quiet on the line, the particular quiet of a woman who has found what she needed and is already thinking about what comes next. Then the HOA's own discovery documents delivered one more thing, buried in the board minutes from the night they voted to approve the pool. 4 votes in favor, 1 against. The dissenting member's objection, recorded plainly. I want it noted that the southeast boundary has not been verified against the Wolfson deed, and I am not comfortable proceeding. Her name was Carol Fenn. She'd resigned 2 months after that vote. She lived 4 streets from my property. When Vera called her, she picked up on the second ring, like she'd been waiting for someone to call for a very long time. Carol Fenn's kitchen table was the kind that has seen serious conversations. Scarred wood, mismatched chairs, a coffee pot that ran all day. She sat across from Vera and me on a Wednesday afternoon with a manila folder in front of her that she'd clearly been keeping for a while. Organized the way only a former county clerk organizes things. Labeled, dated, cross-referenced, ready. She slid it across the table without preamble. "I've had this for 4 months," she said. "I was waiting for someone with standing to sue." The first thing in the folder was the Development Agreement Amendment, recorded quietly at the county clerk's office on a Friday afternoon in January, when nobody was paying attention. It expanded the HOA's authority in several directions, including the service area extension provision Dorinda's attorney had been using against me. Carol walked us through it calmly. Under Texas Property Code, any HOA amendment that materially changes members' rights requires a proper member vote, 2/3 approval, noticed meeting, the full process. This amendment had skipped every single step. Signed by 2 parties only, Dorinda Yancey and Prescott Dunleavy. Recorded on a Friday, never presented to the membership, which meant everything the HOA had done to me under that amendment, the billing, the easement claim, the service area extension, was built on a foundation that didn't legally exist. I'd suspected it. Vera had suspected it. But suspecting and having a former county clerk hand you a documented paper trail are 2 very different things. Then Carol reached into the back of the folder. This is the part I think you need to see. It was a real estate purchase agreement between Prescott Dunleavy and a holding company called Caldera Acquisitions LLC. The agreement included an option to purchase the HOA's common areas, including the aquatic center, at significantly below market value, contingent on one condition: the aquatic center being fully constructed and operational. I read it twice. Then I looked at the registered agent listed for Caldera Acquisitions LLC, Dorinda Yancey. The room went quiet, in the way rooms go quiet when something shifts permanently. Outside, a mockingbird ran through 4 different songs in a row, completely indifferent to what had just landed on that kitchen table. I sat with it for a moment. Not the fraud itself. I'd half expected something like this, if I'm honest, from the moment Harlan found that transposed parcel number. What I sat with was the scale of it, the patience of it. Dorinda hadn't just overreached. She had constructed something. She'd pushed through an illegal amendment, used it to justify building on stolen land, let the membership fund the entire project through their dues and my fraudulent bill, and then positioned herself to buy the finished asset at a discount. The residents would have ended up with a depleted reserve fund and a board president who quietly owned the facility their money built. My $1,847 wasn't a billing error. It was an investment solicitation. She just forgot to ask. Vera set down her pen, which, in the 18 months I'd known her by then, I had never once seen her do mid-conversation. She looked at me across Carol's scarred kitchen table and said, very quietly, "Garrett, this isn't a property dispute anymore." She was right. We'd walked in with a land encroachment case. We were walking out with evidence of fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and enough for a criminal referral that would be on the DA's desk by Friday morning. Carol refilled the coffee without being asked. Nobody spoke for a while. The mockingbird had moved on. Garrett Wolfson, after leaving Carol Fenn's kitchen, didn't call reporters, didn't post on social media, didn't show up at the next HOA meeting to bang his fist on the table and demand justice. He went home and started working. The first call Vera made was to the Kerr County District Attorney's Office. She drafted a formal criminal referral, survey tampering, land fraud, breach of fiduciary duty by an HOA officer, and walked the assigned investigator, a man named Morton Gillespie, through every document in Carol's folder, plus everything we'd built over the previous 11 months. Gillespie had the unhurried manner of someone who has seen this kind of thing before and knows exactly how long to let evidence accumulate before he moves. He took notes. He didn't tip his hand, but he didn't dismiss it either. The second move was the quiet title action. This is the legal mechanism by which a property owner asks a court to definitively establish, on the record, permanently, binding on everyone, that they, and only they, hold title to a specific piece of land. A quiet title judgment gets recorded in the county deed records. It doesn't expire. It doesn't get appealed into oblivion. It is, in property law, as final as things get. And with an unbroken deed chain going back to 1951, 4 iron pins documented in county records, Harlan's title examination, and a 1988 title insurance policy I'd found in the lockbox, our paper trail was about as clean as paper trails get. Vera filed it on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, the HOA's attorney had been served. The third move was mine. I called Cliff Dabrowski. Cliff is 64, runs a septic pumping and excavation business out of a shop down the road, and has been a friend of mine since the winter I rebuilt his pickup truck's engine for cost, because he'd just come off a bad season and couldn't afford the parts markup. Cliff has never forgotten that. He is the kind of man who pays his debts in full, with interest, and who will rearrange his entire work schedule if you ask him the right way. I asked him the right way. Cliff has a commercial pump truck, a Vactor unit, bright yellow, diesel engine, the kind of machine that moves 4,000 gallons an hour without breaking a sweat. We sat at my kitchen table 2 evenings running and worked out the plan the way mechanics plan things, practically, sequentially, with contingencies for the parts most likely to go wrong. Once the quiet title was granted, and we were both confident it would be, Cliff would bring the truck to the southeastern corner. We'd pull the pool drain covers, run the hoses, and pump every gallon of that water into Cliff's tank, load after load, until the bottom of that concrete shell was as dry as the caliche around it. Best estimate, 5 hours, 4 loads, weather depending. Then we'd clean it, pressure wash the walls, pull the filtration housing, strip out the pump equipment and the pergola lighting Dorinda had installed at member expense. Leave the concrete shell exactly as it was, because removing it would cost more than it was worth, and I had other plans for the space. From a farm supply co-op in Fredericksburg, I ordered a commercial livestock waterer, the kind designed for cattle operations, holds 100 gallons, refills automatically from a well line, built to last 30 years in Texas heat. We'd bolt it directly into the concrete floor of the shallow end, plumb it to my existing well, and string a single strand of low-voltage electric fence along the pool coping to keep the cattle from going over the edge. The pergola, with its cedar posts and the string lights Dorinda had picked out, would stay. It made excellent shade. My Herefords, who have no opinions about HOA aesthetics and considerable opinions about good water pressure, would do the rest. Vera added one more layer while I was planning the practical side. She filed a civil RICO claim against Dorinda, Dunleavy, and Caldera Acquisitions, LLC. RICO, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, is a federal statute most people associate with organized crime, but it applies to any enterprise engaged in a coordinated pattern of fraud. And a civil RICO conviction comes with treble damages, whatever the court determines you lost, multiplied by 3. It's a serious instrument, and filing it signals to everyone involved that you are not here to settle cheaply. The HOA's attorney received that filing on a Thursday. I'm told the board meeting that followed lasted until midnight. Meanwhile, Phyllis Carnahan had been busy. 61 Calderwood Pines homeowners, people who'd been paying dues to this HOA for years, were now learning where their reserve fund had actually gone. Phyllis had their names on a list. She called it the interested parties list, and she was ready to move the moment Vera gave her the word. Every piece was in place. All we needed now was the court date. Dorinda was not sitting still. When the quiet title action hit the county records, public filing, anyone could pull it, she went into a mode that can only be described as administrative warfare, methodical, relentless, and increasingly desperate in the way that people get desperate when they realize the ground under them is shifting and they can't find solid footing. Her first move was to go after my livelihood. She contacted Wade Pelton, a livestock broker in San Antonio I'd worked with for 9 years, and implied, carefully, without quite committing to anything actionable, that I was involved in litigation that might affect my property's long-term viability as a cattle operation. Wade called me directly the same afternoon, told me exactly what she'd said, word for word, and then said, "I just wanted you to know, we're not going anywhere." I thanked Wade, made a note of the call, forwarded it to Vera. Then the countersuit arrived. The HOA filed a claim alleging that my quiet title action constituted tortious interference with their established operations, and that I owed them $217,000 in unjust enrichment for failing to contribute to community infrastructure that allegedly benefited my property. It was, legally speaking, a paper airplane. Technically, it achieved liftoff, but not far and not for long. Vera read it in her office, called me, and I could hear in her voice the specific amusement of someone who has been handed a gift wrapped in legal stationery. "They're spending their defense fund," she said. "Let them." Then Dorinda went to the press. She contacted the local weekly, the Calderwood Courier, and pitched a story about a reclusive rancher targeting a beloved family amenity. The reporter assigned to it was a young woman named Stevie Brandt, 26 years old, trained in data journalism, the kind of reporter who treats public records the way I treat a broken engine, methodically and without mercy. Stevie talked to residents. She talked to Carol Fenn. Then she pulled the public documents herself, the permit application, the LLC registration, the purchase agreement. Because Stevie Brandt does not write the story she's been pitched. She writes the story the documents tell. Her piece ran not in the Calderwood Courier, but in the San Antonio Express News, which picked it up on a tip. The headline was not what Dorinda had been hoping for. I won't quote it here, but it used the word scheme in the second paragraph. Meanwhile, DA investigator Morton Gillespie had been doing his own quiet work. He'd traced the survey pins. Specifically, he found one of the original 1962 iron pins in a pile of fencing scrap behind the construction contractor's staging area, pulled from the ground. Still had caliche caked on one end. He had it photographed, tested, and entered into evidence. Then he subpoenaed the HOA surveyor's phone records. The HOA's surveyor was a man named Tad Beauchamp, 44 years old, licensed for 20 years, mortgage, 3 kids in private school, a career built on a credential that takes years to earn and can be revoked in a single hearing. When Gillespie sat across from him and laid out what he had, the email, the pulled pin, the phone records, Tad Beauchamp made the decision that anyone in that position, facing that evidence, with that much to lose, eventually makes. He cooperated fully. He produced every email, every instruction he'd received, every document he'd been asked to alter. He signed a written statement. He surrendered his surveyor's license pending investigation. And in his written statement, he named the person who had told him exactly where to restake the southeastern boundary. Vera called me the evening Gillespie shared the statement. "It's over for her," she said. "She just doesn't know it yet." I spent that weekend doing what I always do when I'm waiting on something I can't control. I worked, fed the cattle at 6:15, checked the water lines, walked the fence. The cedar was holding the last of the season's green, and the air had that particular edge it gets in the Texas hill country in late October. Cool enough to remind you winter is coming, warm enough in the afternoon sun to make you forget it. I walked the southeastern corner slow. The pool sat blue-green behind Dorinda's chain-link fence, the pergola lights off in the daytime, the water perfectly still. I stood there for a while. Cliff had serviced the pump truck. The livestock waterer was on order from the co-op in Fredericksburg. I'd measured the pool, 21,000 gallons, give or take, and calculated the pump loads down to the hour. Everything was ready. All I needed was Judge Waycroft's signature. 3 days before the hearing, Dorinda made her most dangerous move. Through a property management consultant named Russ Halperin, collared shirt, rental car, the polished manner of a man paid to deliver bad news pleasantly, she sent a settlement offer to my front door on a Thursday evening. The offer was not unreasonable on its face. The HOA would deed back legal control of the 0.8-acre parcel, drop the countersuit, pay $25,000 in good faith compensation. In return, I would sign a full release of all claims, the quiet title, the civil RICO, and critically, any cooperation with the criminal investigation. Halperin delivered it with the careful neutrality of a man who has learned not to editorialize about the offers he carries. He stood on my porch and read the terms clearly, and waited. I let him finish. "Tell them no," I said. He blinked. Is there a counter you'd like me to bring back?" "No counter, just no." He nodded once, walked back to his rental car, and drove off down the Caliche Road. The porch light clicked off behind me. The evening smelled like warm cedar and dried grass and the particular quiet of a decision already made. What Dorinda did next was either brave or delusional, depending on your generosity. She went to the county commissioner's office. Specifically, she approached Commissioner Ray Bledsoe, who had maintained friendly relations with Dunleavy's development interests for years, and pushed for an emergency resolution declaring the pool a public safety infrastructure asset immune from private litigation interference. It was a creative maneuver. It had essentially no legal basis. But if Bledsoe had been willing to sign it, it would have bought time and generated headlines that muddied the water. What Dorinda didn't know was that Stevie Brandt's story in the San Antonio Express News had run that morning. By the time Dorinda walked into Bledsoe's office, his phone had received 47 constituent calls since 8 a.m. His deputy had stopped counting emails. The meeting lasted 12 minutes. Bledsoe did not pass the resolution. He later told his deputy it was the shortest meeting he'd had in 20 years in office. 2 days before the hearing, the HOA filed a motion to continue, requesting a 60-day delay, citing newly relevant discovery. It was their last viable stall tactic, and they knew it. So did Judge Doris Waycroft, who had presided over Kerr County civil cases for 16 years and had a well-documented impatience with exactly this kind of filing. She denied it in under 24 hours. The hearing stayed on schedule. I spent the day before in the way I've spent every significant day of my adult life, working. Fed the cattle at 6:15, walked the water lines, did a slow circuit of the fence in the long morning light, boots crunching on caliche, the cedar holding the nights cool in their needles a little longer than the air around them. I walked past the southeastern corner last. The pool sat quiet behind its chain link, blue-green and still, the pergola throwing a clean shadow across the water in the early light. I stood at the fence and looked at it for a while. 11 months. 11 months of certified letters and county inspectors and legal filings and a Facebook poll and a smear campaign, and a settlement offer that treated $25,000 like it ought to cover a fraud. 11 months of being the difficult rancher, the litigious neighbor, the man trying to take something away from the community. I was not angry, exactly. Anger is loud and burns fast. What I was feeling was something quieter and more durable, the specific readiness of a man who has done the work, checked every line, and knows the engine is going to turn over. Phyllis Carnahan's 61 homeowners had confirmed they'd be in the courtroom gallery the next morning. Not to disrupt, just to be present, to make visible the community that Dorinda had claimed to represent and had instead treated as a funding source. Carol Fenn would testify. Tad Beauchamp would testify. Morton Gillespie's investigation had advanced to the point where the DA's office had quietly told Vera they expected to file criminal charges within 30 days of the civil outcome. Stevie Brandt would be in the gallery with a notebook. A wire service photographer would be beside her. And Cliff Dabrowski had the pump truck gassed, serviced, and parked in my equipment barn, 40 minutes from the pool, ready to roll the moment I called him. One more sunrise. One more cup of burned coffee at the kitchen window. Then it all moved. Judge Doris Waycroft took the bench at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday in late April. The courtroom was fuller than it usually gets for a civil property hearing. 61 Calderwood Pines homeowners filled the gallery. Retirees, young families, people who'd been paying dues to this HOA for a decade and were now sitting in a courthouse to find out what their money had actually funded. Stevie Brandt was in the third row, with a notebook and a wire service photographer beside her. Morton Gillespie sat in the back row in plain clothes, unhurried as always. Dorinda sat at the defense table in a burgundy blazer, very still, her reading glasses on their beaded chain. Her attorney whispering something she didn't appear to be listening to. She did not look at the gallery. The hearing took 3 hours. Vera presented the Wolfson deed chain going back to 1951, the 1962 survey with my grandfather's initials in the margin, Harlan's title examination, the fraudulent parcel description on the permit, Tad Beauchamp's written statement, and Exhibit Q, the email about pulling the pins. The HOA's attorney argued implied easement, community benefit, equitable estoppel. He was thorough. He was professional. He was working with material that had stopped being viable 6 months ago and hadn't improved since. Judge Waycroft listened to everything with the focused patience of someone who has already read all the briefs and has her questions ready. Her ruling came at 12:17 p.m. She read it from the bench. The HOA had no valid easement claim over the Wolfson parcel. The county permit was issued on a fraudulent description and void as applied. The 2023 CC and R amendment was improperly executed and void under Texas Property Code. Garrett Wolfson held clear fee simple title to the 0.8-acre southeastern parcel, including all improvements thereon, including a $200,000 swimming pool, She ordered the HOA to cease all operations on my property immediately and remove all signage and equipment within 30 days. The gallery did not cheer. It exhaled, 61 people releasing 11 months of held breath simultaneously, a sound like wind moving through dry grass. Vera touched my arm once. I looked straight ahead. Dorinda set her reading glasses on the table. She said nothing. By 2 p.m., Cliff Dabrowski's pump truck was backed up to the pool deck. Bright yellow, diesel engine running with the low, authoritative rumble you feel in your sternum before you hear it with your ears. Cliff jumped down from the cab, gave me a nod that contained approximately everything two men who've known each other 30 years need to say, and we pulled the pool drain covers together. Cliff engaged the pump. The sound of 21,000 gallons being extracted from a swimming pool is not a delicate sound. It begins as a deep gurgle at the drains, builds to a sustained rush through the 4-inch hoses, and settles into the rhythmic mechanical thrumming of the Vactor doing what it was built to do. Relentless, patient, efficient. The water level dropped visibly as you watched. The smell changed as it fell. Sharp chlorine at the surface giving way to the cool mineral smell of pool bottom, wet concrete and limestone, and the faint earthy scent of whatever settles below any body of standing water when nobody's looking. It took 5 hours and 4 pump loads. By 7 p.m., the bottom of the pool was damp gray concrete, the tile lines stark in the last flat light. The former Calderwood Pines Community Aquatic Center, now a very large, expensive, empty concrete shell, sitting on Garrett Wolfson's ranch land. Stevie Brandt was there. So were about 30 residents. Somebody brought a cooler. The next morning, Cliff and I installed the livestock waterer, bolted to the concrete floor of the shallow end, plumbed directly to my well line. 100-gallon capacity, automatic refill, excellent pressure. I strung a single strand of low-voltage electric fence along the pool coping, the kind of simple, practical solution that costs $40 at any farm supply store and works perfectly every time. Then I opened the southeast gate and walked 6 Hereford cattle through. They moved to the water without hesitation, lowered their heads, and drank. That slow, patient, rhythmic sound echoing slightly off the pool walls, off the pergola overhead, out across the cedar breaks of the Texas Hill Country on a Wednesday morning in late April. Stevie's photograph ran nationally by afternoon. The caption identified the location as the former Calderwood Pines Community Aquatic Center. It did not need to say anything else. 2 weeks later, at a special HOA meeting called by Phyllis Carnahan's group under the HOA's own bylaws, Dorinda Yancey was removed from the board by a vote of 71-4. She did not attend. She had, by that point, received notice from the Kerr County DA's office that she and Prescott Dunleavy were being charged with tampering with governmental records, conspiracy to commit fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. Tad Beauchamp had been separately charged. At the meeting, Carol Fenn was elected interim board president. Her first 2 motions, formally acknowledge the unlawful construction on the Wolfson property, and initiate a full financial audit of the HOA's reserve fund. Both passed unanimously. Garrett did not attend that meeting either. He was home. The cattle were settled. The evening smelled like cedar and diesel and good clean well water. Here's what happened to everyone. Dorinda Yancey pleaded no contest to tampering with governmental records. 3 years of deferred adjudication probation, $78,000 in restitution to the HOA's reserve fund, permanently barred from serving on any HOA board in the state of Texas. Caldera Acquisitions LLC was dissolved. The purchase option agreement with Dunleavy was voided. Prescott Dunleavy paid a civil judgment of $165,000 and a fine. His cooperation with prosecutors was described in court documents as limited and reluctant. His reputation in the regional development community did not survive the San Antonio Express news coverage. He has not broken ground on a new project in Kerr County since. Tad Beauchamp lost his surveying license and received 2 years of probation. He also, in a move that surprised everyone, issued a written public apology to me. I read it once, folded it, put it in the fireproof lockbox in the barn next to my grandfather's deed, where it can keep. The HOA's countersuit was dismissed with prejudice. The civil RICO claim settled confidentially. But Vera has a new photograph on her office wall. Me in my work shirt, standing at the edge of the former pool, 6 Herefords drinking behind me. She calls it the best closing argument she never had to make. Ray Bledsoe, the county commissioner who took Dorinda's meeting, did not seek re-election. His primary challenger ran on HOA accountability reform. She won by 11 points. The HOA's financial audit, completed under Carol Fenn's interim leadership, confirmed what we'd suspected. The reserve fund had been depleted by $201,000 for the pool project, bypassing the member vote that Texas law required. The new board pursued recovery through the HOA's errors and omissions insurance policy and recovered $140,000. The membership voted on what to do with it. $60,000 went to establish the Calderwood Pines Educational Access Fund, a scholarship program for graduating seniors from the local high school district. The first year's awards went to 2 students, one heading to study environmental engineering, one studying agricultural law. The ceremony was held at the community clubhouse on a warm May evening. String lights on the cedar post pergola, a table of food that Phyllis Carnahan had organized with the efficiency of a woman who has been waiting for something worth celebrating. Phyllis also baked a sheet cake. It had a cattle hoof print and blue frosting on it. She has never explained why, and I have never asked. The southeastern corner of my 34-acre parcel looks different now, and exactly the same. The concrete shell of the pool is still there. Removing it would cost more than it's worth, and the cattle have developed opinions about the drainage. The livestock waterer runs quietly in the shallow end, fed by my well, reliable as anything on this property has ever been. The pergola throws shade across the water trough in the afternoon heat, which the Herefords appreciate without knowing the history. Along the pool coping, in a band of concrete I poured myself one October weekend, I pressed a series of boot prints and hoof prints into the surface before it set. A small, permanent record. Not angry, not triumphant. Just a record of what this land is and who it belongs to. In the northeast corner, I pressed my grandfather's initials with a metal stamp I found in the barn. E.W. Same corner of the parcel, different medium, same message.